So I'm going to go through the notes that went along with the reading you did the other day. And as I'm going through this, please double check your notes. Make sure you have everything that I have here. It does not need to be exactly word for word, but you should have at least the same concepts. But the other thing that's important is that there are a few slides where I added some extra information in. So you'll want to make sure that you add those other pieces in as well. So the first slide we did together as a class, so I'm not going to really go through it much, but one thing I'm just going to bring up is just an example that talks about how reproduction does play a role in species survival. And the example they gave in the reading was all about raccoons. So raccoons have two eyes, they have dexterous front paws, and they have that band of black across their face. And basically, in order for them to have survived and reproduced, their ancestors must have also have had the same traits. So it's showing that there was that adaptation that occurred that made them look this way, have these specific features that enabled them to survive. So the next piece that we're going to look at now is specifically the cells themselves and looking at the functions of them, but how those functions play a role in reproduction as well. And the first part that was mentioned in the reading was about organisms that were single-celled. And when single-celled organisms are making a new cell, when they are reproducing, it is exactly the same thing as making a new organism. So for example, if you have an amoeba, when that one cell is dividing, that is creating two new cells in the result, and those two new cells basically are two organisms. So that means that it has reproduced. Now, on the other hand, multicellular organisms are a little different. There are different reasons why a cell would reproduce. And the first one it mentioned or talked about was example with a strawberry plant. In this case, reproduction can take place without a mate. And if it's taking place without a mate, your result of cells are going to be identical cells. Now, the other things that can occur have to do with growth and repair. So it's not only that that these cells are reproducing to create a new organism. For example, a cell is going to divide and create a new cell for that organism, and that's basically how it's growing. So the cells themselves are not changing in size. They're staying pretty much around the same size. Instead, when an organism is growing, it is growing larger, and it is growing larger because the number of cells have increased. So you're not changing the size of the cells, you're just changing the number of cells. You can even compare this to when an organism is injured and certain tissue might be torn or there was some sort of injury and the body needs to repair itself. So the same thing's happening. Cells can reproduce to make new cells for those that have been injured or need to be repaired. The last part I'm going to focus on is this difference between mitosis and meiosis. Now let me move myself so I'm not in the way here. Now mitosis and meiosis are basically two different ways that cells can divide. And I split them up in half here. So if you want to change your notes, if you need to change anything, please feel free to do that. I did add some extra information on these slides that was not found in the reading. So make sure you add that as well. So anyways, mitosis is a type of cell division that can occur in any organism. So when this is happening, it's producing two genetically identical daughter cells. So the cells are dividing, the new cells are going to be identical to the original. When we have a daughter cell, it's going to contain a nucleus that contains an exact replica or an exact set of those same chromosomes from the mother cell. So everything will be identical here. This is typically responsible for asexual reproduction in single-celled organisms, so back like how we talked about the amoeba, but it also is what happens when your cells are growing. So for example, in humans, during any type of growth or repair, every cell is going through mitosis, so creating identical cells to what originally was there. On the other hand, meiosis is a little bit different. So again, it's still another form of cell division. However, this is only going to be happening in humans, plants, animals, and fungi. Meiosis specifically only occurs in sex cells. These cells are also known as gametes. So for example, A female gamete would be an egg, and a male gamete would be a sperm. So when you have the meiosis process occurring, the difference from mitosis is that the final result is that you have 4 cells. However, these 4 cells are going to result in half of the number of chromosomes that were originally in the parent cell. And we call them haploids because they only have half of the chromosomes. And we'll look at the diagram next on kind of how this is occurring, but that's really the difference. Mitosis is creating an identical cell when it reproduces. The meiosis process is creating 4 new cells, but they're not going to be all identical because they're only containing half of the number of chromosomes. Lastly, the other big difference then, because we have different cells being created, they're not all identical, it does contribute to genetic variation in your offspring. So that's what would make your offspring different from the parents. Now, finally, the last slide here is your diagram of mitosis and meiosis. So if you look at the mitosis side, we have a parent cell to start, and what happens in the process is that the DNA or the chromosomes are replicating. So you're making a new copy of the DNA. So when the cell divides, each new daughter cell is going to have an exact copy of what the original parent cell would have. Now, if you look at the meiosis side, it starts off similarly. It starts off with your parent cell. The DNA replicates, and it does divide into 2 daughter cells, but the process doesn't end there. It does divide again, but since the daughter cells don't replicate the DNA, the chromosomes actually split. One set goes with one daughter cell, the other set goes with the other daughter cell, making these your haploids. So these 4 daughter cells would be your sperm and your eggs. So these processes will be a little bit more in depth, or you'll learn a little bit more about them when you get to biology next year. But this is at least the basics, and the idea of this is just to see the difference between why certain cells reproduce. Some are for growth and repair, and some are for creating new organisms. So if you did not get all of your notes, please make sure you go back, pause, rewatch, whatever you need. Make sure you get everything. And if you have any questions, please let me know.